Here we go, game on. Good afternoon, everyone. So the good news is we are the last panel between you and cocktails, and it's going to be lots of fun.
That's awesome.
Some of you already started.
I'm Beth Sidhu, Stagwell's Chief Brand and Communications Officer. Stagwell is a global marketing network that works with brands all over the world to transform their interactions with consumers. And last year, we, along with these two wonderful gentlemen, created something called Sport Beach at the Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity. And we looked at how sport drives culture and technology and innovation, and how athletes are becoming brands in new and interesting ways. So today we're going to continue that conversation. Kalen Thornton, the CMO at PepsiCo and a former linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys. At Gatorade, Kalen works to lead brand strategy, integrated marketing, portfolio management, creative storytelling, and the expansion of consumer engagement across digital channels. I learned something in doing this research. In between football and Pepsi, Kalen worked in private wealth management at Nike and managed to get an MBA from Stanford. He is also a Longhorn and went to UT Austin. So say
welcome.
Good afternoon.
Anybody out here? Welcome.
And Brandon Marshall, who was a 12-year NFL veteran and today is redefined really what it means for athletes to be creators, started I Am Athlete, the wildly influential podcast, as well as House of Athlete, which is a lifestyle brand. So we're so excited to have you guys here. We're going to talk about lots of different things. And to start, actually want to go back to the beginning. Tell me about your personal journey as athletes. How did you get into sport, and how did that take you a little bit to where you are today? Kalen, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, no. I've played sports since I came out, I think, like just one of those hyperactive kids. So I needed an outlet, and my mom was like, you know, can't stay in the house, so go outside. And so first sport was gymnastics, and which is unorthodox, and then soccer, rollerblade hockey, hooping was my first love, and I've been the same height since I was in 6th grade, so I thought that was gonna be the path, and then I sailed out, and ultimately football was where I leaned. So I didn't start playing organized football until my freshman year of high school, and I was a little bit of a late bloomer, but was fortunate enough to be able to get a scholarship at the University of Texas, went down there, played all 4 years, learned a lot under Coach Brown, and then had a chance to go and play in Dallas as a free agent, which was definitely a journey. I think, you know, when you are coming from sport and you're dreaming of making it big or making it to the NFL your entire life and it doesn't go as planned, but then you still have opportunities like earning in a way through free agency, it just taught me a lot about resilience and how to keep moving even when there's obstacles in front of you. But I was fortunate enough to play there for a couple of years and then had old man knees and had to give it up. So that was a little bit of my journey, at least through playing professionally. But I even now think of myself as an athlete and still trying to impart that on my kids and try and stay active as much as I can. So.
Awesome. Brandon?
Well, it wasn't sport, it was football for me. I come from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the east side of town, and it was only football, right? We actually had organized baseball because my best friend Davon Allensworth played baseball, and we all looked at him like he was like a weirdo. Like, who plays baseball? I'm sorry. But it just wasn't a thing in our neighborhood, in our community. There wasn't even basketball, there wasn't lacrosse, there wasn't soccer or track. Football, sport, I would say saved my life, right? Like, there's a lot of us athletes that come from these neighborhoods where that's the only way out, or that's all we see, or that's what we think. You know, so when I'm sitting here and I have the privilege to be around, you know, Kalen, it's like, wow, you are a CMO, like, of PepsiCo? Like, that's a thing, right? So it's pretty cool because a lot of people look up to athletes, but I'm always interested in people who have done it differently, right? So it's pretty cool, but sports saved my life.
So when did you think sports was really going to get you where you wanted to go? How old were you when you had that Not like wanting it, but when you realized that was going to be your ticket.
6 years old.
6. Tell us about that.
I mean, I remember, it was like, Super Bowl is like a festival in our house, or was. And my father used to go to all the Super Bowls. And, just a little story so you guys can connect with me. But connecting with me, you're connecting with other athletes. You understand our stories, right? And how to work with athletes where we come from. But my father was a drug dealer, right? So, I always want people to understand that, why some of us think the way we think or operate the way we operate. My father was always out at all the Super Bowls, and we would stay home most of the time. My mom would cook us anything we wanted. This is when we got steak and potatoes, like everything. And I can never forget a time where I was watching a game, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, this running back, he's not getting it done. And I was like, and I really thought if I was in that moment, I would have done better. Now looking back, I'm like, I was a baby. But that's how I thought about the game and thought about myself. So 6 years old, this was it. This was it for me.
So you already believed in Brandon Marshall, the brand?
No. So a lot of us struggle because the sport defines us. Think about how I'm talking about the story now. It wasn't until 2011 where I spent 3 months at McLean in this outpatient program working on me that I realized that there's a business to it. It was all personal, So it wasn't until I was actually starting my career, probably year 4, year 5, where I realized that, it's a business.
Well, let's pick up on that because I think what you said, it's personal. So one of the things we want to talk about today is athletes as brands, not athlete-led brands, but really like athletes who are out there as entrepreneurs, as strategists, as brand leaders, as influencers. So Brandon, when you were thinking about starting I Am Athlete, when you're thinking about starting different businesses, were you thinking about doing that? You said year 4 basically in the league. How are you doing that at the same time? Building your player brand and building your personal brand?
Yeah. So I spent my entire offseason in 2011 at Harvard building out a case study on transition. And what came out of it was content and commerce. So everything I'm doing today is built off of that case study. Professor Anita Elberse, she launched the BIMS program that a lot of you guys may be familiar with. So I was able to be a part of that inaugural program, but we also did some work outside of that. And I never thought of myself as a brand because the upside wasn't great, right? Like the guys in football, Peyton Mannings of the world, Tom Brady's are the guys making money. I'm making $10, $11 million a year, showing up to get 40, 50,000 or a shoe deal that's 100,000. Like that doesn't make sense to me. I could take advantage of my key moments on the field, sell T-shirts, me catching a one-hand touchdown, and that's 100,000 in itself. So I started to think like a business. Opened my own office in Chicago, and we tried to figure it out. So I've always thought of myself more that way.
So Kalen, when did you think about athlete as brand in your career? Because you were at Nike for many years.
Yeah. I'll go back to kind of like points of inspiration too. While I played a multitude of sports, one of my personal connections to the game was actually, it stemmed from my father playing. So I had an advantage. He was a professional athlete himself. He happened to play for the Cowboys. And I grew up like with this perspective of not only wanting to be an athlete myself, but this just admiration, looking up to him like a hero. And so part of my connection to football was just this desire to connect with him. And my parents split, and he's still around. I actually saw him this past week. He was recovering from surgery, but there was a moment in time where he wasn't around as much. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of my motivation for football stemmed from like wanting to be like Pop and wanting to have a bigger connection with him. And so that as a catalyst into the game was advantageous for me because he would give me the breakdown on what it was before most other athletes experienced it. So I knew it was a business, is where I was going. Like he schooled me on that early. And then even when I was in college, I felt it was a business, just like from being an athlete and seeing how people were monetizing it. And so I never thought of myself as a brand either, but I did think of myself as a business person. I thought of myself as someone who could be a leader. And so I was constantly curious about what was happening with our sponsors, our partners. I'd be that nerdy guy in the locker room reading Wall Street Journal, like even in college and certainly in the pros. And so what changed for me was this recognition that, like, hey, there's all these people who are monetizing off my likeness, and why shouldn't I do that myself? Why can't I actually be in the room making decisions on behalf of athletes and empowering them to be business persons as well, or whatever their desires might be? And so that was a transition for me. And I'm hyper aware of our own personal brand and how you show up in these different spaces, but I'm of the same mindset. We're not brands, we're multidimensional, we're artists, we're business persons, but we're more than an athlete.
Well, let's pick up on the multi-dimensionality, because certainly what we see with a lot of athletes who then go on to be very successful off the field or the court, that they are multi-hyphenates, that they're interested in lots of different things, that they explore those interests earlier and earlier in their career. What do you think it is about successful athletes that also lends to being a multi-hyphenate? Like, is there a connection, or is it just kind of happenstance?
Absolutely.
What's your theory there?
For me, it's not a new dynamic. Like, if you think about some iconic athletes throughout history, Jack Johnson, Muhammad Ali, Billie Jean King, even Serena, these have always been people who've been successful at whatever they put their mind to. So the connectivity is more on this ability to know what it's like to put in hard work, to see the end result, to know what it's like to be a part of a team, to push yourself beyond limits that you think would prevent you from being successful. And so I think there's some commonalities there. But like, what's different now is that athletes today are afforded just vastly more resources, more platforms. And then even there's a cultural element where it's more acceptable to let yourself through. Like, there was a period there where you probably had a lot of the multi-hyphenated athletes, and then there was a moment where it pulled back and you almost had this version of athletes that felt like they needed to be a certain way and act a certain way and not be present in the community or whatever it may be, not get involved with politics. And now it's shifted back, and I think it stems from the fact that, like, no, it is embraced. People want to be able to connect with people, and athletes are people just like everyone else. So being able to express your point of view and have a perspective on a business or a brand or creative or content, that's all just tapping into who we are already.
Yeah. Athletes are super sophisticated right now. I hate the conversation around athletes now. Like, every time I meet with a financial advisor or some type of marketing agent, they're like, well, we got to come in and, help athletes here. And that. I'm like, do you guys not know how sophisticated athletes are now? And one of the reasons why is because the mindset is shifted. The mindset, this is not who I am, right? This is what I do. So you hear athletes say this all the time. And it's a challenge for some athletes because sometimes we put the fame and all the other things before the game, these younger athletes. So it's an edge for younger athletes to focus on the sport. But the information, we study each other. When I was in the NFL, I was studying the top wide receivers. I would go into the video department every single offseason, like, all right, give me Terrell Owens, give me Steve Smith, I want Reggie Wayne, I want Larry Fitzgerald, I want Andre Johnson. I want to see all their catches. I want to see all their touchdowns. I want to see third and short. I want to see third and long, right? So I'm learning and we're studying each other. We're competing against each other. So now off the field, when you see not only an athlete, but even an artist, maybe a Jay-Z, say, here's the blueprint, LeBron James, Serena Williams, Muhammad Ali, like we're studying, and now we're doing that, right? And so an athlete launch a production company, 10 others follow. Athlete launch a fund, 10 others follow, right? So we follow each other. So athletes are super sophisticated now.
So speaking of sophistication, Gatorade certainly has a reputation for doing sophisticated, interesting work with athletes and sort of in marketing generally. When you're thinking about athletes you want to work with, athletes that fit your brand, both at Gatorade and across the portfolio, how do you evaluate athlete brands? What are you looking for? What are you thinking about?
The first filter is authenticity. I think a lot of brands, and this is universal, athletes or influencers, anyone you would partner with in order to authenticate your brand, but authenticity is first and foremost. Like if you're going to partner with someone and they've never touched your product or they've never engaged with your brand, then it's easily sniffed out, and people tend to read through the BS. And so that's one lens, and it's important not only to be able to identify those individuals that are already consuming the product, but it's also important for you as a brand to have guardrails around how you want to show up, because everything through association, as much upside as there could be from those partnerships, there's just as much risk sometimes. Yeah. And some guys unfortunately decide to, and guys and girls, women and men, decide to do things that reflect poorly on your brand. So you got to be able to measure that. But authenticity is the first one. The next one, connectivity, is a big part of it. Like how do they not only connect with other athletes you're trying to serve, but the broader consumer base. And so those athletes that are comfortable being on these stages or are comfortable, speaking on behalf of your brand and really just have their own point of view or connected through the mediums and platforms that you're trying to come to life on is critical. You could have the best athlete in the world, but if they are not into social these days, it makes it difficult to be able to partner with them. Not impossible, but still something that you need to think of. And then the last piece is like how distinct are you, or do you stand out amongst the crowd of athletes now and in perpetuity? Because the thing about being an athlete, there's a new round of us coming every year. And so your ability to not only perform at a high level over time, to have a point of view that stands out, and to show that personality, show that multi-dimensionality is big. And so those are kind of the three things that we think through: that authenticity, connectivity, and distinction on who we select and who we decide to partner with.
Authenticity, connectivity, and distinction. Writing it down. Brandon, when you were playing, social media was not what it is today. You had to,
yeah, right.
for better, for worse. How did you think about demonstrating how did you connect with fans? How did you make yourself distinct? I mean, you have and you do, so maybe it just comes easily, but how did you put yourself out there before some of those tools were available?
I tried to figure out, purpose. I feel like everything we do should be purposeful, right? So I don't really feel like I'm working, I'm fulfilling my purpose. And I go back to 2011 when I realized that, my purpose was to help bridge the gap in the mental health community. And so how I start showing up, part of the case study was us studying Live Strong and Lance Armstrong. The people who we study, Lance Armstrong, Live Strong, Magic Johnson, Keanu Reeves, Boomer Esiason, Doug Flutie, people who did amazing work in the community, in the nonprofit space. Beyond the field, the court, the big screen. And so that's what I was trying to do. And so how I showed up in sport, my cause, my cleat. So we pounded the pavement, beat down the door for a couple of years to get that field to become a space for, others outside of just cancer, what we do for breast cancer awareness. So now we're starting to see athletes represent other things. The way we got that done was being disruptive and kind of disrespectful.
Tell us more.
So you can't wear, there's uniforms, right? And there's rules and regulations. And if you don't stay within the guidelines, you get fined. So we put together this whole campaign where we leaned in. So during Mental Health Awareness Week and month, I would wear lime green cleats to the point where they would, the day of the game, come to my door. You can't wear these cleats or we won't even let you on the field. So, well, you go tell the fans why I'm not playing. There's 36 million Americans that are affected by cancer, but there's 100 million that's living with something when it comes to mental health. Even the patients and the families that's dealing with cancer, they're dealing with mental health challenges. Mm-hmm. We need to tell this story. So if I don't play, I don't play. Thursday night football, Monday night football. Go out there, catch a touchdown or two, win the game, billion impressions, turns into a thing. We match the fines. So that's how I would show up. Just be disruptive, tell the story. Anytime I had a moment where I was after a game or a practice, I had my lime green on. So point of view, that was my thing. It's I'm here to bridge the gap in the mental health community. So whether it's in sport or it's now in business, everything that I do push back to that. So our platform, our show. So how does that show up on some of these things we're talking about who's the GOAT? Well, before we even get to that conversation, or maybe at the end, it's like, how you doing, 1 to 10 mentally? Mm-hmm. And it just started this cultural, social phenomenon, so.
So your use of lime green was sort of the marker to get people to pay attention to something on the field, but that was off the field. I feel like influencers are a huge part of how we get people to pay attention to things today, and was also not a part of the game as much when you were playing. Why do you think influencers, in the influence community, how does that interact with athletes? And if you're Gatorade and you're thinking about how you're going to tell your story, obviously athletes are a part of that,
Yep.
but so are a broader group of influencers. How do you think about influencers as brands?
I think it's interesting. The word influencer can sometimes be polarizing. I think we call them authenticators within Gatorade and Pepsi. Yeah.
All right, no influencers, only authenticators.
And the reason why is like, I think of people who are credible in their space because they have either been dedicated to the craft, they have a perspective, purpose, point of view that allows them to be a megaphone for a number of issues is where influence comes from. And so the various mediums in which we're now connecting with people, whether you're an athlete that affords you that platform, whether you're an entertainer, a musician, whether you're a creator, you can even be a chef. Our oldest influencers, a part of Gatorade, are actually the trainers and practitioners that are in the locker room. So when you're sitting there getting taped up, if they can give you credible information around what your sports nutrition and hydration, that was certainly something that Gatorade has leaned into a while. So we see that vast universe covering all scopes of influencers and authenticators. And our job, which can get complex sometimes, is like, how do you weave that tapestry together? Like, how do you actually have someone or a multitude of people across all these different dimensions speaking on behalf of your brand in a way that feels connected, in a way that's additive, and ultimately helping consumers understand what your brand's all about. Like that is the purpose of those partners. If you can get people to be amplifiers of your message in a way that's authentic to them and crosses over, that complements what their purpose is and what they're speaking about, that's when you get word of mouth. And that's been around for a while. If you think about like broadcasters back when it was just radio, like that was their purpose, right? Like, and so again, making sure you have clarity on what your message is, making sure those ambassadors, authenticators have clarity on it, and that you are doing things in order to accelerate your message is really where it comes together. Community is a great space for that to happen. The products that we're promoting is a great space for that to happen. And the stories ultimately is where like it comes to life in the most rich way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe I'll go a different direction here, but we have to continue to learn as athletes how to be influencers because it's different. For a few years, influencers created more impact than athletes, because an athlete, you like sit on a pedestal, it's like, you're glorified. Influencers, they know how to connect, right? And when I say impact, what I mean by that is like, I'm drinking Gatorade, right?
From your Sport Beach
authenticators,
mug.
there you go. More people would, you'll convert, authenticator would
You can call it what you want, man.
Would convert more than an athlete, even if that athlete have more, right? Because it's just like we're posting great pictures or highlights, right? But nowadays, athletes, we're starting to get it. We saw that last year, Sports Beach, right? First year in Cannes, and it was amazing. You have Spotify there, you have Google, and everyone's there. And everybody wanted to be around Sports Beach. So it shows the impact that athletes have as authenticators. I think it's important for us to understand though, like it's more so cultural currency, like I like to talk about it in that way. And it's like when you see Stephon Diggs wearing something or drinking something you wanted. And that goes back to the first authenticators in our culture, and that was hip hop.
Totally.
Run DMC and LL Cool J, and then there was Jay-Z and everyone to follow. So a great book for you guys who want to learn more about that. It's called The Tanning of America by Steve Stout. And it talks about, influencers, authenticators, culture currency, and how to work with people in that space.
One build to where you're going is when you talk about influencers, like in the new wave of influencers, these creators, one area that they have been more successful than athletes, who I also still consider influencers, is that their ability to storytell is part of their craft. And that's similar with the hip hop cats. Like that's the root of what they do. They storytell. Now that athletes are getting more savvy and they understand that, and they're becoming better storytellers, is where you're starting to get this proliferation of brands and athletes that are embracing that. Whereas in the past, either they didn't have access to it, or there was even dynamics that not even that too long ago, shut up and play ball. You know what I mean? Now when these athletes
there's a moment of that every season.
Totally. But that's probably the biggest difference I see in these influencers. They are much more proficient and understand the platforms and mediums and how to get their stories out there. And the athletes are catching up, but that they're still light years ahead.
So that actually, we were talking before about, the question was, why do you think athletes are able to translate, sort of their fans from player day to consumer day? And you said, actually, you don't think athletes are great at that. Yeah. Tell us more.
No, I think that we're still learning. I feel like I always look at myself as a case study. Not everyone converts. And so, I think athletes need to learn how to become influencers and connect with their audience, because we're in this phase now where we built an amazing audience and we have a lot of influence. But now when we talk about business and monetization, you have to be able to convert. And the way to convert is, what Kalen was just talking about. You have to do a little bit more work. You have to be sharp in your message, your perspective, and you just got to be consistent. You got to say the same thing over and over again in a creative way. So we're still learning, and I feel like we're at the forefront of that. There's a few of us athletes, the Pat McAfees of the world, and ourselves, and there's others that came before, shut up or dribble an era or two with LeBron and uninterrupted. So there's still a lot of work to do.
And when you say conversion, you mean monetization.
Monetization, right? At the end of the day, these top brands in here, the creator economy is about to double within the next 10 years. And a lot of those resources, brands are trying to figure out how to partner with people like myself or these new digital platforms. And so we have to become sophisticated in what we're doing and how we're approaching it. It's all about that, right? It's money. We need partners because we're connecting. Our impact is greater than the linear and the more traditional routes. But then when you look at the back end, are we retaining? Are we converting? Are we able to build teams, manage? So there's a lot of work because there's a lot of opportunity for us. We're talking about in the next 5 to 10 years, we may have a few athletes, exiting, maybe 10 years, with billion-dollar exits if they're able to build a company.
So Kalen, when you're thinking about athletes you work with, obviously you can measure monetization on sales. That's the most traditional way to do it. But how else do you think about measuring conversion and impact?
It's one of the areas that my team is constantly studying because it's changing so rapidly. The landscape is, and historically it was enough to act as a brand, as a sponsor, and you were investing in spokespersons, and it was a simple transaction where you did give them the check and they said, hey, I'm drinking Gatorade now, and that was enough. But it's not enough anymore on both sides. One, consumers are have started to get a little bit numb to it, they can sniff it out. And then two, there is a lot more activity within the entire influencer athlete community on like, wait a second, I understand that my value to this is exponentially greater when I lean in. So we're going from like sponsorships to actual equity partners, and we're going from individuals where, or even if you think about signage and a team or a league, we're going from that to, no, we're actually equity stakeholders together, and we need to grow this together. And it means as much buy-in from their side as it does ours. So that's one of the biggest shifts that we're thinking about is like, from like the sponsorship mentality to the partner mentality, from transactions to relationships, and then ultimately this new space in the creative economy around storytelling is very, very rich. You can be on as a brand and not do a traditional campaign. In fact, there's many case studies that it's more effective on how brands are growing. And so, excuse me, those are the spaces where we're shifting a little bit of our mindset. And I can see a world down the line where, companies are providing seed capital to all these new brands and working with them to grow and scale. And that's different than a company building something internally on their own and then just go bring in a couple people to be ambassadors.
Right.
So that's another space. The other place I'd go to is like growth can happen certainly through the lens of financial, but also personal and community growth as well. And so we look at not only the bottom line in terms of the ROI, but how many more people are we connecting through you? Like what is the lens? There's a program that we started at Gatorade when I hopped in called Equity in Sport. And it's all about breaking down barriers for people, for minorities, people who are from these various groups that are underrepresented and getting them in the game. There's a clear metric there because the more athletes we have in society, the more it's going to benefit Gatorade and any other company that's in the business of sport. So those are some of the longer term KPIs that we look at as well.
Right.
If we can double that population, triple that population, and it was the same sort of hypothesis at Nike as well when I was there doing that type of work. That's another way in which we measure it.
So I feel like Nike is very much like, for a long time, went to market as the elite athlete.
Totally.
And now it's more, if you've got a body, you're an athlete. If you've got feet, you can run. How do you think about, if you're going to double the population of athletes, how do you think about doing that? And then I'd love to hear how you think some of the work you're doing encourages people to be athletes and stay in the game.
Well, you said it earlier. You said I still consider myself an athlete, right? It's, to me, the way I define athlete is mindset.
Totally.
It's just mindset. It's just like, there's just some things that you learn in sport that you can't get anywhere else. And if you're able to take that into another industry, new field, I mean, you really separate yourselves. Or if you didn't play sport, if you're able to study it and learn it, it really just gives you that edge, teamwork, perseverance, work ethic. There's just so many things that you can pull from it. So that's how I kind of define it.
Nah, you're spot on. Like, there's this, to answer the first part of the question, like, if your lens around athletes is so narrow and elite to the point it gives you a ton of authenticity and credibility, but it limits that total addressable market, then ultimately you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Right.
And so part of the shift that you're seeing, not only the Nike, Jordans of the world, Gatorades, is let's not forget about that elite part, because that's where authenticity comes from. That's the core. We're bringing solutions to help those elite athletes get better. So we're not going away from that, but we are widening the aperture, broadening it, so that any person that is on their journey to be the best version of themselves can have that athlete mindset. And that really is about being able to break through walls, being able to put one foot in front of the other and do things every day in order to move yourself forward, in order to attain those dreams. And so for us, that's how we're thinking about it from that perspective. And then when you come back to the notion of even now I identify as an athlete, I'm not the same athlete I was, not even close.
I'm sure it's right there.
Yeah, no, my kids remind me every day that I'm not as athletic as them, but I can go out and do something that brings me that peace, that brings me that same sort of feeling that I had when I was playing ball. Like, funny story aside, last night I was coming back from dinner and I jumped in a pedicab, and I'm a big dude, so
Please tell me the picture didn't happen.
No pictures happened, but a young woman was pushing this pedicab and she was working. And like, and so by the end of the ride, she was beating the lights. I was like, man, she is moving. And I'm like, felt lighter for a second, but at the end of it, she was wrecked. And she's like, man, you gave me some work. And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry about that. She was like, no, I enjoy it. And she started describing like almost being in this flow state and being in this state of mind where that exertion gave her peace. Like she's an athlete all day. Like and so like that, taking that and bottling it up and giving it to the community is one of the big things that inspired me to still stay in sport after I stopped playing the game. And so that's what we're trying to tap into.
It's funny because all the work that I was doing led up to House of Athlete. You described it as a lifestyle wellness brand, and it is. And it's like modern therapy, and it's 5 pillars, like how you train, how you eat, how you recover, tribe, recovery. There's just few things that show up in elite athletes' lives like consistently. So we started working on this campaign called I Am Athlete, which is probably a lot of people may know me from a business. Thank you so much.
Give it up for that.
And so that's our media entity, right? But it really was a campaign for House of Athlete to connect with people that are a nurse or firefighter, entrepreneur, weekend warrior, at-home mom, at-home dad. And then the pandemic hit, and we started this podcast, and we needed a name. And I was like, in 2 weeks, it's like, we're going to start this podcast in 2 weeks. It's like, all right, here's the name. And then it broke through. I was like, oh, shit, excuse my language. I was like, damn, that was supposed to be for House of Athlete. But talking about athlete mindset, this name, I Am Athlete, that's why it was created. It's supposed to be a campaign for House of Athlete.
It's a brand campaign that worked. It became its own brand.
It became its own brand,
ones.
yes. Yes, it
ones.
became its own brand.
So we're going to take questions from you guys in a couple of minutes, so get your toughest ones ready. I want to just pick up on I Am Athlete and where you're going with the brand.
Yeah.
Like, what are the extensions? I know you and Cam Newton have a show, I Am Iconic, but tell us where the brand is going.
Well, I'm going to talk to you guys about the feeling, because sometimes it's hard to, and this is supposed to be internal language, but I Am Athlete will be the next generation ESPN. Not just ESPN, but there's other networks and platforms. It just doesn't work for athletes anymore. Tired of going on someone else's set or show, you got that gotcha moment. About to donate $2 million to this community, but you're talking about something 10 years ago that happened in my youth. And that's the story, that's the headline. Or you cut what we say for clicks. We just did an episode with Russell Wilson, and within the first 3 days, 7 billion impressions. And I learned a lot through that process too, because we sat down and he was the first athlete who was like, I want the headline to be this. And I'm like, shit, Russ, I really got to ask the messy questions so we can get the impressions, right? But it's how we do it. It's always worked. It's because it's coming from me, and it works.
What headline did he want?
I'm a winner. And it worked. So I say that because it's a partnership, a collaboration. For me, it works for Gatorade. They want those impressions. We got those impressions, right? So I'm thinking about the numbers. But I'm also thinking about protecting a player in a way where he feels safe to come tell me the story. But we're still going to talk about everything, hold him accountable. But I am a winner. So how did we do that? We sat down, we partnered on, the content, what we're trying to accomplish. And we said, okay, this first clip that we put out, this is the first clip. I'm a winner. I lost for 2 years, but I'm still a winner. And you can't get used to losing. Losing is contagious, but so is winning. Networks start picking it up. So we waited. 12 hours. And then we put out the next clip about parenting, then about Denver, and then about all the other stuff that everybody wanted to hear. So that's what we're taking on. And the way that's going to show up is in live daily shows. Our own version of SportsCenter, First Take, PTI, our weekly shows. You see a lot of, we call them podcasts. A lot of athletes are doing this. Live experiences. There's a huge appetite for people to get to know us outside of the field, off the court. And then we call it On the Go. On the Go is just athletes showing up as journalists. And so that's what I Am Athlete is. And I call it like next generation. That was supposed to be internal language. I said ESPN, but that's what it is.
So we're going to take a question from the audience. I'm supposed to direct you to the microphone in the aisle. And if you don't mind, introduce yourself. Go for it.
I'm Samara from Australia. Thank you for your beautiful storytelling.
Wait, get closer to the microphone so everyone can hear the important questions.
Okay, so is that working?
Sure, we'll go with that.
You're good.
Maybe I'll
There you go.
There you
lift it
go.
up. There you go. Own it. Thank you. So I'm Samara. I'm from Australia, working on a campaign for teenage girls about body image issues. And influencers have really messed things up, like the traditional version of an influencer. And so now we're bringing athletes together with brands to use storytelling to help teenage girls with body image issues. Just wondering what advice you would give me for this campaign based on your experience as amazing storytellers.
Kalen, that's you. Body positivity for girls.
Very much so. When I was in the CMO role of Gatorade, part of the opportunity was to connect more with women for the brand. It's been historically, not intentionally, but skewed towards masculine teen athletes. And so part of that is like, you can't be what you don't see. And we made a conscious effort to actually go against the traditional tropes of fitness and select people that were on a journey of being the best version of themselves, of being athletes, but just didn't fit the bill. And so there was a woman that we brought in to the launch of this new product called G-Fit. Jessamine Stanley, I believe is her name, if you all know her. She's a yogi. She's an incredible young black woman who is just full of energy, and the things that she can do are incredibly difficult and incredibly hard, but she didn't look like the athletes that you might stereotypically see. And we caught some flack. There was some ignorance that was spewed on the social platforms that were coming after her. And we had to make a decision as a brand. Do we stand up for this individual? Do we pull the post down? But ultimately, we decided, we're going to do what's right, what we know to be right. And we stood by her, we supported her, and we doubled down and put out more content. And long-winded setup to say, part of what I would encourage you to do is take those calculated risks. Put people in front of the camera, allow them to tell their stories in a way that they may not have ever been asked to. And you will for sure connect with an audience that cares. And that will far outweigh any sort of negativity that comes from it. And I know there's examples from other brands recently that had not had that experience, but I would say the big difference is certain brands either didn't come from an authentic place when they did that, which it sounds like you are, or they didn't lean into it. They didn't continue to lean into it. They avoided the risks. They avoided the controversy, and then it inherently doesn't work out for anyone. But lean into those spaces. Give those people the microphone and amplifiers. Let them tell their story. Do it in an authentic way, and you all will do incredibly well.
Let me add to that really quickly. I think there's phases to these conversations, and I feel like we're kind of past the awareness stage. And so my advice would be really lean into the creative and the storytelling, right? There's been a lot of brands, Gatorade, Nikes of the world, even influencers talking about this and leaning in. And it's like creativity, the production is what's going to separate brands these days. So that's my advice.
Totally agree.
Next question.
Sorry, I'm a rapper. Do I just take this off? No, just kidding. Hi, my name is Nia Cherry. I also go by Joy because NBA Twitter is harsh, so I have an alias. I studied sports marketing at Northwestern University, and it's really good to be here today because I actually found out about Brandon Marshall when I was incarcerated on false charges. I spent 40 days in jail, and all I had as a window to the world was the USA Today. So I would just open up the sports page and kind of like follow the scores and all of the stories since I couldn't watch the games, and they had an article on your podcast. So I took a notebook and I wrote down everything that I wanted to look up when I got out, and I looked up your podcast and I was just inspired by what you're doing for athletes and just Black men in general. So it's a full circle moment for me to be like, I realized like, wait a minute, I found out about him when I was in jail. Like, but it's a full circle moment to be here and to meet you, so thank you for being here. So I am trying to apply my sports marketing in sports journalism in an interesting way. I'm a huge Philadelphia 76ers fan. Let's not talk about our seed right now. We have a game tonight. But I started a fan page for Tyrese Maxey because I saw that that was very successful in music, how fan pages can kind of help elevate a brand. They can have like anywhere from 500,000 to millions of followers. So I wanted to support him early in his career, but right before South by Southwest, the page got reported and taken down, and there goes my portfolio of all the work that I've done. So I wanted to know, how can we as fans, as content creators, how can we support the brand of the athlete without stepping on toes? I know there's controversy about monetizing off of your image, but just as a total grassroots fan, how can we as content creators support the athletes and become a part of that brand and become a part of that conversation and help mobilize the fans of the athlete?
That's a great question, and I don't know if I have the best answer for you now, because I think about it more from like the other side. Like when I think about I Am Athlete, I think about user-generated content. When we've had our most success, whether it was a drop, a t-shirt drop, or our top performing shows, it was us repurposing our fans' content or comments. And so I think of some of the dopest brands, it's like the ownership really is in the fans. So like you guys really own it.
But it's your image and your likeness, so there has to be some type of synergy.
Yeah, but when we think about, so I'm not thinking of it from an athlete perspective anymore. I'm thinking about it from an influencer. Influencer, we connect, right? Athletes, sometimes we really don't connect. And so as an influencer, that's what we want. And so I think your opportunity is like maybe to lead that, like what you were already doing. Right, because now it'd be easier for me to just go directly to you to connect with hundreds of thousands of fans, right? So I think you're right on track.
Let's pick up on the NIL piece of this. So one of the stats that we were looking at last week is that athletes who have NIL deals at almost any level are surpassing traditional influencer performance by an average of 7x, going up to 11x for male basketball players. I'm curious how the NIL conversation is changing what you're doing.
I think it's ultimately changing what we're doing because we're now having to look at a wider audience of athletes to tap into, and it's a positive outcome. Like I think, when you're coming up in college or even high school and you have the ability to own the narrative, which is kind of back to even the last conversation and question to the woman who just asked that. One other way to think about it is like you can still have commentary, you can have a point of view, you can have a narrative that you lean into these athletes or these spaces, and that's actually the currency. Like what is the quality of the information, the creative, the content that you're offering up? That's not exclusive to athletes. You can have a point of view on that, and that's what NIL athletes are doing a really good job of. Like this whole next generation is incredible. I look at my kids sometimes, I'm like, how can you watch YouTube like that 24/7? It's ridiculous. Somebody screaming on the other side because of Fortnite, like what's wrong with y'all? But what I failed to realize is like, no, that is their version of the news today. Like when you watch Mr. Beast, that is the new version of Pat Sajak and game shows, and like And what they're doing is they're creating their own platform and their own channels, and they're becoming these experts, back to my definition of influencers, in all these different spaces. And if you have something, that people want to hear, then monetizing is what you should be able to do. So NIL, thankfully, that it's happened now. It took way too long. The flip side of that, the watch out, is I do see behavior sometimes of these athletes that become so fixated on that they forget about what their main job is. Like, you still have to perfect your craft. Mm-hmm. You still have to put in the work, and you can't get so distracted by this other area that you don't get to where you're at. And I won't name any names, but I think you're starting to see some examples of athletes that have actually peaked earlier than any athlete has ever done in the history, because they can now. Like, came out of high school with a ton of hype, or even in college, stayed 1 or 2 years. They go on to the league, and then you're like, what happened to this individual? Well, in some cases, they got too fixated on over here versus doing what they need to do. So those are the both benefits and the watch outs, I think, of NIL. So.
I want to know what you think, but I want to get a couple more of our audience questions.
So we go.
Rapid fire, my friend.
Rapid fire. Hey guys, Adam, coming from an advertising perspective. So brand strategy in my head is kind of, illuminating the path forward on the way to win. And I think that gets lost sometimes in my world a little bit, but how have you used your athlete mindset to win based on, a consistency of brand have you guys been talking about, and then opportunity spotting going forward?
One more time.
How have you used your athlete mindset to establish brand consistency and then opportunity spotting going forward to win in the marketplace?
It's good. You want to go first? That's a good question. So funny, I was in a therapy session 2 days ago with someone on my executive team and a therapist, right? And we're just working through it because it's team environment. We got to be on the same page. We got to be aligned. And we're talking about people. And I just shook my head like 30 minutes in the conversation. I was like, we've done this before. We've done this before. This is the team. This is football, right? Like, and we were talking about how that process, like, you take that and you can put it into business. I was like, we just wasted. I felt like, I could be wrong, I felt like we wasted like 30 minutes talking about this, when I'm like, the process already exists. And so, when I walked into certain locker rooms, there was only 3 to 4 things that we focused on. It's very simple. All right, check your ego at the door, win a division. Everybody had their own little things. And so it's the routine of that. So how I've used it is keeping things simple, focusing on the main things, and staying in that rhythm, which is routine. There's a lot of distractions out there, but literally we go in, we do the same thing over and over again. I call it putting a championship routine in place. And it's built off of the work and the process and not the emotions. Because if I come in and, like, his knee hurts today.
It really does.
Can I tell the people
Yeah,
that,
please do.
you're on injured reserve or the injured list?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're supposed to lift weights today.
That part's not true.
Well, I'm saying that we're supposed to lift weights, say, as athletes, as players. He may not do it because of the feeling, but if you buy in and embrace the process, you just stay in rhythm. This is what I got to do. This is what I got to do. This is what I got to do. So it's that process, championship routine. And no matter how you feel, no matter what happens, you just continue to work the routine. You continue to work the process. You lose a game. What do? How do you get over it? Get back in the weight room. You get back into film. You gather as a team, and you just work it and work it and work it. The thing you need to be focused on is your routine, is your process championship level or not?
I couldn't agree more, man. Like, it's such a unique insight, because that consistency and routine is critical. And one of the things that happens with brand strategy is, like, we get bored with our own playbook faster than any other kind of function out there. So we'll move away from a campaign and it's working. Well, why'd you do that? Well, I just, I thought it was stale, or I had another creative idea. Well, don't do that. That's working. Like, stay with it. So that's one piece of it. And then the other glaring difference between the corporate world and working in brands and teams is that you actually don't know if you're running the same offense sometimes. Like if you look across your peers and you look across the executive board, and if there's not alignment between marketing and finance, there's a disconnect there. Worst case scenarios is even within marketing, you've got one team over here running, this open offense spread eagle, and the other one's over here running the wing
Man to
team.
man.
And you're like, wait, that was from 1947. Like we moved on from that. And so really making sure that you're working against the same objectives and you truly are aligned is probably the hardest component of being in this environment versus team, because teams are like, no, you either gonna do this, we're gonna cut your ass. Like
right.
And
it's
there's
very
going to be a score, there's going to be a moment
Totally.
that there's a score in lights, and everyone's going to know if we worked as a team.
100%.
And it's easy for me because like on the House of Athletes side, it's like, all right, was this a part of my 13-year experience as an athlete? Somebody come in, well, we want to do this. I'm like, I never did that.
Yeah.
I've never seen that in a facility before. And then on the media side, it's, does this protect the athlete? Does it put the athlete first? Because if you read the mission statement to FS1, ESPN, it's to serve the fans. Well, here we serve the athlete, the fan follows, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very easy for me to stay on point because it's like athlete, athlete, athlete. Very simple.
All right, we're going to take one more question, then I've got a rapid fire. But I hope everyone wrote down Brandon's pearl of wisdom is your routine championship level. Yeah. So I'm going to put that on a t-shirt to remind ourselves when we wake up in the morning. Right. All right, last audience question, then a little rapid fire, and then we'll let you guys get to cocktails.
Yeah, nice. Thank you for being up here and taking these questions. This is kind of for both of you, and you've touched on it earlier with NIL. How does the conversation evolve to college athletics where you're on a time limit, 99% of you aren't going pro, there's regulation is in chaos, there's not a great education system in place. How does that evolve? I know there's a Gatorade Player of the Year, she did a panel earlier, right? Like, how does that involve with working with college athletes particularly, and then from the athlete side, how do you take advantage of the time that you have and, push that forward in the next stage of your life?
Geez, it's a layered question, but in a good way, and I think we're still waiting to find out. I don't know what will happen, but what I hope happens is you actually have society and this community embrace professionalism from top to bottom. And a lot of people would immediately say, like, why would you do that? Like, because there are some traditional schools of thought. It's like, oh, you go play to college so you can focus on academics. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. My mom would kick my ass if she thought I ever said anything that was taken away from academia. But that doesn't mean these athletes can't also be professionals. And so what I'd like to see happen is a lot of the grassroots and even our system get reevaluated. There are so many spaces that are either inefficient, and I will say it, in some cases exploitive, around athletes. And my hope is that NIL starts to change that, not only through hopefully some refined policy, but you start to have true business persons go and look at the model. And if you think about the European model, especially for soccer and some of these other club sports, it's probably where we need to go. We probably need to be thinking about player development. We probably need to be thinking about helping these athletes build their brands all the way from the time that they're younger through however level that they play
Whatever
at.
level they get to.
It already happens in pockets. Like tennis, different system than basketball and football. Golf, different system than basketball and football. And so I'm hopeful that you start to have this consistency across all sports to where kids are not only taught, all right, yes, play the game, develop, but here is the business of sport. I'm thinking about it even like trade. Like that's what we should be preparing these kids for. And that's, if I'm an athlete, that's what I'm gonna hopefully instill upon my boys, not only continue to work on perfecting your craft, but understand how it works all around you. So that for me is the long-term benefit potentially of NIL. It should be.
And I see it as an opportunity on the business side of it, right? Sticking with athlete, House of Athlete, we start training athletes at the age of 12. This Olympics, we'll probably have 5 or 6 medalists that we've been training, going back to when I was playing in the league, 2012, 2013. There's times I'm interviewing cats, and they're like, I train at your Tampa location. I'm like, or I train at your Chicago location, right? And so now NIL passed, what, 4 years? It was 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
Yeah, if that even, yeah.
Yeah,
3.
it's 3.
So from the House of Athletes standpoint, the opportunity is to teach. I have these babies at 12 years old, teaching the families, right? Some of them open up an account, taxation, right? Management, looking at deals, contracts. So I look at it as a partnership. And then on the media side, it's education as well. One of the things that people love about a lot of our athletes, you know, even outside of I Am Athlete, you know, conversations that we have is like giving the game. And, you know, the youth and other athletes, professional athletes, they listen. So it's teaching them how we should do business.
Totally. The beautiful thing, B. Marshall and I talk about this often, like, the beautiful thing what he's done and is doing with House of Athlete is he's building out an ecosystem that, and some people have heard the, you know, the expression flywheel, truly is creating a flywheel to where he's got the storytelling, he's got the experiences in the actual house, he's got the product that he's working on and developing with these different CPG brands. And it is a blueprint and it's a model now that can be emulated by a lot of other, you know, rising athletes. LeBron at a different perspectives doing that through Spring Hill and Undefeated or Uninterrupted. And so those blueprints are out there. The key question over time will be, what is the capacity of the market? How many of them can we sustain? Some of them will be successful, but the ones I believe will be successful are similar to House of Athlete, that's like not about just me as my one athlete, but about all the other people that are in this community. And that'll be the differentiator between the brands that stick around from athletes and the ones that go away, because, you know, NFL stands for not for long. And that equates to your celebrity and your impact too. And so you've got to be thinking not only through the lens of yourself, but ultimately, you know, your peers, your community, the community of athletes in a broader perspective.
So last question, in this giant community of athletes at all different levels, give me 1 or 2 names of people who intrigue you, either as athletes or brands, or ideally athletes who have brands. Give me someone you got your eyes on.
I can't give you one. I'm gonna give you a bunch. These guys that I'm about to list right here, I like people are thinking about equity and ownership, building out platforms, because that's our impact. That's the type of currency that we have. Patrick Mahomes, watching him, Caleb Williams, even how he thinks, asking the team, you know, if you draft me, I want ownership, which is crazy and it's wild, could mess up his brand, but I like it. Yeah. Caleb Williams, Travis Kelce as an older player, you know, getting into media, built on his own platform, really interesting over the last year, parlaying success, Super Bowl, you know, his relationship, just, this should be personal. Coco Gauff, NASCAR, Xfinity, there's a young brother, because they're trying to get in new spaces, Rajon Caruth, in action sports, Zeb Powell, could be the best to ever do it, have done it. Caitlin Clark, obviously, she's amazing, see what she can do on the shoulders of the people who came before, but she really has an opportunity to take women's sports to a whole nother level. You got the who's who coming to her game. So I can name so many other athletes, Devin Haney, but there's a lot of athletes that are thinking the right way. Like I just said Devin Haney because boxing is in an interesting space, but Devin Haney's his own promoter, and the way he and his father is going about it could be the blueprint to the conversation that we just had around Neil and making sure our youth athletes are operating the right way, and the people we have to lean on is who? The parents, right?
All right, Kalen, give me someone you're intrigued by.
Man, similar, it's hard to name one. Brandon Marshall. I'll start there. He's doing an incredible job, that guy there. But no, outside of him, I think, you know, there's an old running back, Justin Forsett, who played Seahawks and a couple other teams. He's developed a brand, Hustle Clean, and Justin's awesome because he's been a serial entrepreneur, so this is not even his first attempt, but I love what he's doing. He's tapping into that space. I can't remember the name of the gentleman that started it, but there's a brand, Actively Black, right now is doing some incredible work in sports and apparel. former athlete that started that one. And then I'll go non-traditional. Because I believe that journey doesn't have to happen if you did not make it to the professional level. And so when you look at an incredible artist now, Toby Ngawwe, like former football player, UNT, leaned into the creative side. I had the chance to meet him like 4 or 5 years ago before he blew up, and he's literally taken over the world. And like he's a true representation of that multi-hyphenated dimensionality that you talked about. I'm trying to think if there's, I think there was one else, the person I was thinking about. Oh, those young kids, I call them that. They're not that young, but like Amp and Kai Cenat and Duke is really the one I'm thinking of. He was a former football guy. They've leaned into that creative space and are doing some incredible things. I think they're going to be like
Destroying.
next. They're next. Destroying's another one. Yeah. So there's a lot of athletes out there that are doing some really interesting things. So much so that if you've seen an athlete that actually could have made it and they've quit their craft to go do something else, I actually think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because that means you were able to leverage the sport in order to find your passion, and you're going out and kicking ass at it. So go for it. Keep doing it. So.
Well, that's going to be the last word. I want to say thank you to Brandon and Kalen.
Thank you.